and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by executive producer of The Charlie Kirk Show and Turning Point USA spokesperson, Andrew Kolvet. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, just to start, we're 2 months out from losing our friend, losing someone who was close to both of us. I know that you and I were just talking about it. It's been a journey, and I think it will continue to be a journey. But I will tell you, I have personally been so thrilled to see the enthusiasm that remains out there for Turning Point. That, Eric and I were at Auburn this past week, and honestly, I was blown away. Andrew, I looked around at one point and I said, do they know that Eric and I are the only people coming here? Is this really all for us? But it wasn't all for us. It was for Charlie. It's what he started, what you guys did so much at Turning Point to kind of manifest out there across the country. Your reaction to the outpouring of support and the kids who are still coming out and lining up all day long, Andrew, to come to these Turning Point events. Yeah.
And by the way, thank you, Lara, for you and Eric, what you did there at Auburn, along with Benny and Coach Tuberville. And it was an amazing, amazing event. And we had over 6,000 students there. You guys packed it out, and you did such an amazing job. You were only beat on this tour by JD Vance. That was and Erica, by the way. Yeah, Erica and JD.
Yeah. If they beat us, I'm okay with that, Andrew.
Exactly. It was at Ole Miss. Yeah, the week before, and but you guys got the 1 year anniversary of the big win, and
yes.
I can't tell you how many people sent me the video of Charlie right here on this set where I'm at right now. Where he got a little teary-eyed and thank God when President Trump got reelected, and it's amazing to see, candidly, the outpouring of support, and it has been since it happened. When you kind of look back, and as you said, it's 2 months, and it still feels not real. Some days, Some days I wake up and I'm like, okay, we got this and we can do this and we're good. And then, Charlie's given us, so much of a foundation to work from. And then other days I just can't believe it's real. And I had one of those today, actually. And I just kind of had to, you kind of go through this process of realizing that this is my life, this is real life, this is all of our country's life, that we lost Charlie, who was a giant of his generation, but of any generation. I consider Charlie a modern-day founding father, and at 31 years old, he accomplished all of that at 31. It's amazing to think, and, but he lived such an extraordinary life. I got to spend 8 years basically, 100 texts a day, multiple phone calls, or we were traveling together or working, at conferences and events or taking meetings. And it's I can just tell you, he was such an extraordinary person. I know you know this, and you and Eric both know this, but even in the quiet behind the scenes stuff, he was somehow more extraordinary than his public speeches and his debates. He was true. He had integrity. He was such a hard worker, and he was an autodidact. He learned, he studied, he inspired, those around him to do the same. And so it doesn't surprise me when I think about the man that I know, and how I saw him on in a private way and in a non-public way. And when you realize that a person lives with such integrity privately, and yes, he's got this public platform, but when you see that he's so true, it doesn't surprise you when you see the outpouring of support, when you see how people, what God is moving in the hearts of this country and how he's moving in the hearts of the people and students, and you just realize that there is a God, he's real, and he's moving amongst us, and he's moving world events, and Charlie's life is just such a reminder, it's such a faith builder for me, because again, I saw how earnestly he believed these things and how he lived his life accordingly, and then people saw it. You can't fake that stuff, and it came through in the way he spoke and the way he lived, the way he interacted with people, and so it's been amazing. it's been shocking, but in retrospect, like only Charlie Kirk could pull all of this stuff off. He was just such a tremendously special, wonderful person. And the fact that I was so close to him for 8 years and I saw him at his worst and his weakest points, and the fact that I know that better than anybody is really a testament to what a great guy he was.
Well, you know what? I love the authenticity that you just talked about. And I think people are searching for that in a world where there's so much that can be fake, Andrew, just like social media, AI, like there's so much fake out there, filters and all these things. People look for and they seek out and they're desperate for authenticity. And I think that's why President Trump has been so successful. I think it's one of the reasons people gravitated so heavily towards Charlie, because you're right. He was the same person. I mean, gosh, behind the scenes as he was out front, people could feel that. It radiated from him. You can't fake that sort of thing. How did you get involved though with Turning Point? You know, you're saying 8 years, that's a long time. And, you know, so many of us in my family remember when Charlie only had it as an idea and we weren't really sure if it was going to manifest into anything. And yet it's incredible to see. How did you get started with Turning Point?
Yeah, you know, so I was working in Hollywood, actually with Mark Burnett, who's now, I think, the special envoy to the UK.
Yeah.
And so I was helping him launch TV shows and market those, and we were flying around with him and his wife launching, you know, he ended up getting into faith programming as well, so I traveled with him for some of that, and then me and his chief of staff left, and we formed a PR company, and it sort of took off really quickly, and before I knew it, I was working with, you know, The Blaze and Glenn Beck and PragerU and Dennis Prager, and then Charlie and Turning Point became clients, and eventually Charlie and I schemed a plan to work on some other projects, and I ended up launching my own company, and Charlie just said, well, you know, I need a lot of your time, so why don't you set up your own shingle and help me out, and so I did that, and then we launched his podcast together. We were business partners starting in 2019. May 1st, 2019 was the first Charlie Kirk show, and then we went from podcast to broadcast together, took it to a nationally syndicated radio show in, I want to say that was the beginning of October 2020, so just before the election in 2020, we became a nationally syndicated radio show, and then in June of 2022, we started streaming, simulcasting after Bannon's War Room on Real America's Voice, and just off to the races. Like everything else in Charlie's life, the rise was meteoric, and I got to be along for the ride. So.
Well, listen, I credit Turning Point, Charlie, but really everybody within the organization for ensuring that Donald Trump became the 47th president. You know, I know when I was at the RNC last year, how closely we worked with Turning Point. And we did get a nice FEC ruling, Andrew, that allowed us to actually coordinate on things, which in the past wasn't possible. But the help that it gave us with young Americans, with young voters, to mobilize these people, to get them registered, to get them out to vote, to do things like ballot chasing, I can't even begin to tell you how impactful. And you know all of this, but you know, a lot of people out there may not know this. It was such a big part of Donald Trump's win. And we want to keep that going. So, you know, obviously you look around these college campuses and most of the time you think of them as these liberal indoctrination camps. You guys at Turning Point are trying to change that, but it's hard. It's an uphill battle. Where do you see things going from here? How can people better support encouraging the youth of our country to kind of have conservative values and to turn towards these things that are right and true and good and, help our country's future?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big, fair question after, losing Charlie, because he was a powerful megaphone and a powerful communicator for these things. Well, and so you have to lean into the assets and the opportunities that we do have, and namely, we have this incredible growing network of campus chapters all across the country. We have, hundreds of thousands of students that have signed up to be a part of the network and the community that is Turning Point USA. We have hundreds of thousands of people that have now signed up to be involved with Turning Point Action, which is our 501c4, which is where we worked on all that ballot chasing, and with in the swing states. And by the way, Lara, I know you know this, but to hear it from me, who was on those the private behind the scenes chats with Charlie and phone calls. When you took over as co-chair of the RNC, that was a huge deal to Charlie, and he couldn't have been more enthusiastic about your competency, your ability to do that job, to work hard, and really bring the voice of the grassroots into the RNC. And there was not an ounce of doubt about the fact that you were the right person for that position at the right time.
Thank you.
Honestly,
you. That means a lot.
He really believed in you. And, but to answer the question, what do we do? What we have to do is we have to make investments now in ballot chasing and registering the voters, especially young voters, and being on campuses, being where they're at, and messaging to them in ways that make sense. And, I would say that the good news here is that, we've lost Charlie, but from a structural machinery perspective, we're far ahead of where we've ever been. So we have more infrastructure in place. Our tech is better. Our app is better. The data is better. We have a whole election under our belt that every time we learn more and we build more and more data. And so all of those things are really good. And we have more volunteers than ever. So from a machinery standpoint, it's great. The thing I would say is we still have some education that needs to happen with donors. There's a disconnect because donors still are more, for whatever reason, are more apt to finance a commercial that they can tell their friends that as their political commercial, as opposed to investing in the ground game 18 months out or 2 years out.
Well, so it's not as exciting for them. They can't say, oh, look, I did that. But you can look at the election, Andrew, and say, look, I did that, because you really will.
Exactly. So the key is we want to make sure that we're still communicating with donors the right things. Now, here's what I believe after 2024. We had a great ground game in 2024, and I think it was better than past election cycles. There's no doubt, by a long way, actually. However, you could have a great ground game and a bad candidate and a bad message, and the ground game's not going to make up the difference. Because I can tell you, in states like Nevada and Arizona, Kamala canvassers were out everywhere, and people would shut their door on them. They didn't want to hear from them. They would take their literature and throw it in the trash. And you could fill up how many dumps with just the amount of leaflets and pamphlets that were left at people's doors, their door hangers. So you've got to pair a message and a candidate with the ground game. You have to have all of those ingredients to really hit your max output. And this is what we know about young people. They came to us in record numbers in 2024. And Charlie and so many others deserve a ton of credit for that. But they're not sticky. A lot of times these young voters are just giving you a flyer. They're giving you a chance. Prove to me that your ideas work. Prove to me that you can really impact the economy, and you can help me get a job, or you can make the world a better place, right? So they're going to be looking for different things, and they care about affordability. They care about their job prospects. They care about housing. Can they buy a home? Can they afford to get a family? Those sort of bread and butter kitchen table issues matter to young voters as well. I mean, the cultural fights are important, crime, immigration, all of those things are massively important. I would say immigration is one of the key issues actually with young people, because a lot of these young men especially been raised in a country that feels like it turns its back on them. And so, Trump checks that box, right? And so many, I think, of the Democrat, mantle, the leaders of the Democrat Party fail to live up to that. I know Gavin Newsom's trying to be this masculine voice on the left, and there's just going to be a disconnect there. But the takeaway is that we don't know how long they're going to be with us and when they leave us, right? And so we have to do the work from a policy position, from a messaging position standpoint right now to make sure that they stay with us over the long term. And I think that's an open-ended question right now.
Yeah, well, and I think that part of what is going to get them to stick longer, Andrew, will be those actual results, which this president and this Congress is actually allowing to happen. I mean, this president is working overtime, obviously. And I will say I have not seen a Republican Party with as much backbone and fight as this current party has. They did not cower to the Democrats on this government shutdown. They held their ground. I thought it was actually very impressive to watch, because I haven't seen that in my lifetime, at least. But I love that you brought up Gavin Newsom. talk about fake. We're just talking about the authenticity of Charlie and President Trump. Gavin Newsom may be one of the least authentic people, save for Kamala Harris, potentially, that I've ever seen out there in the political sphere. The fact that this guy is now, as you just pointed out, trying to somehow come across as this like macho guy. He's trying to put up X posts, Andrew, as though he's Donald Trump, as though anyone believes that. I don't know. Do these people think that everyone is that stupid, that we don't know what you've done in the past, what you've been like in the past, that you can flip it around and no one is going to notice? That to me is one of the things that I'm just fascinated by.
Yeah, I actually do think most Democrat politicians believe their voters are that stupid. Yeah. Actually, I mean, I really do. I think that they think that they can just sort of speak whatever version of reality they want into existence, and it's a giant lie. I mean, I'll give you one example with Gavin Newsom. So, as you probably remember, Charlie went on Gavin Newsom's podcast.
Yes.
And I was involved in that. I went with him. I was in the room when the interview happened. And for, I would say, 12 months, maybe even longer before that interview happened, we had been hearing stories that Gavin Newsom's son was a big fan of Charlie's. So we get there, we sit down, and all of a sudden we're hearing, he says it. I didn't think he was going to admit it, but he kind of led off with, "My son's a huge fan of yours," and it was, I had to tell him he couldn't come because he's got school, and that's when Charlie left like a really great line. He's like, "Oh, come on, you shut down the schools for like 2 years. Like, what would have hurt you to come on here?" And it's like a really great line from that interview. And anyways, and then so Charlie gets murdered. And Gavin has the gall to go on some interview and say, well, he wasn't really a fan. He was just aware of him.
Wow. Even though he's already said it. He's already put it out there, Andrew. We had been hearing for at least a year before we did that interview that he was a fan, that his son was a fan. He admits it, comes out. We didn't ask him. We weren't going to bring it up. We were going to be respectful. Don't involve the family. Then he brings it up that he's a giant fan and just woke up super early, wanted to come and be there. And then he has the gall to do that after Charlie's been brutally assassinated. Why don't you just say, listen, even my son's a fan of Charlie's, which is what I mean, and that would have been an okay and decent thing to do. It would have been an honest thing to do. You've heard similar things from Jake Tapper. Even Nikki Haley's son is kind of coming out. I mean, this happens. Young men are living in a world in which they basically have been told to downsize the American dream. You're toxically masculine and all of these things. Nobody's shocked that young men are going to be conservative or turn to conservative ideas. So that's just one example of Gavin Newsom sort of trying to rewrite history, doing it with a straight face and lying to people. And I just would say to Gavin Newsom that young men want real fighters, authentic fighters, not squirmy shapeshifters that will say whatever's convenient in the moment. And that's not the way to win young men. I think people see right through it. Well, I'm also grateful for the kind of uprising, I feel like, of the young men in our country. And I think Turning Point had a lot to do with that and is continuing to have a lot to do with that. As the mom of a son, my son is only 8, Andrew, but I think about this a lot. It's hard enough to be a kid and to grow up and be an adolescent and figure out life. But when you feel like, kind of to your point, what you were just saying, the entire country has turned its back on you and somehow you were just inherently bad and wrong just because of how you were born is outrageous. But that's where a lot of young men in America found themselves very recently. And I think you're right. I think it's why they gravitated towards the Turning Point, because it's crazy. We should never be sending messaging out like that around this country. So I think that's why the young men sort of, have turned in that direction. But we got to get young women as well. And a lot of people ask me about this and say, how do we engage with the young women out there? And I think Charlie was on to something whenever he would talk about how important family was, because in my generation, I remember, as soon as I kind of got out of college, the messaging that existed out there was essentially either you get married, have kids, have a family, and you can do that path, or you can kind of go the path of having a career. And if you have any value to yourself, you'll go the path of having a career. Well, that's the whole thing is false, right? You can do both. I'm an example of people doing both. Caroline Levitt is a person who's doing both. Erica Kirk is a person who's doing both, right? You don't have to choose one or the other. But the saddest part to me, Andrew, is that young women have been sold this idea that somehow having a family isn't important. It's not fulfilling. The most important title I will ever have, I've been the co-chair of the RNC, as you just said. I don't know what happens in my future. I've had a lot of great titles. The most important one will always be mom. It is the greatest job, the toughest job, the most rewarding job at the end of the day, and the most important one I will ever have. So we need to start messaging to our young women more. Turning Point has been all over that. But I know you guys must be internally making some sort of a push for young women and trying to engage with them a little bit more. Is there anything you can tell us about that? All right, we'll get right back to the show. But first, you know me. I believe in freedom, independence, and the values that built this country. Now, I'll be the first to say President Trump has taken the steps towards reviving our economy. But inflation, trade deficits, and global uncertainty are hitting hardworking Americans where it hurts. Here's the truth. I refuse to let these hidden forces decide my future. That's why I help protect my wealth with real assets, physical gold and silver. For generations, these metals have held value no matter who's in office or what the markets do. To me, gold and silver mean independence, not just for today, but for tomorrow. If you want the peace of mind I've found, it's time to take action. I've partnered with the #1 rated precious metals company, Goldco, and right now they're offering first-time buyers a rebate of up to 10% in bonus silver on qualified accounts. Visit LaraLikesGold.com to learn how you can help safeguard your savings with gold and silver the way I do. That's LaraLikesGold.com. Looking for a new movie to see during the holiday season? You should watch Karen Kingsbury's The Christmas Ring. It's in theaters now, but don't wait because independent films like this only stay in the theaters if you go see the movie. Starring the incredible Jana Kramer as a brave Gold Star widow, Benjamin Hollingsworth as a charming antique dealer, and the legendary Kelsey Grammer. This heartfelt story based on Karen Kingsbury's brand new best-selling novel is all about love, loss, second chances, and the real meaning of Christmas. What makes the Christmas Ring movie even better? Karen honored our brave American heroes by casting 100 actual active duty and retired military members, including a remarkable 102-year-old World War II veteran. This love story is in theaters right now, and it's a beautiful tribute to the sacrifices our veterans and their families make every single day. Grab your loved ones, head to the theater, and ring in the holiday season with The Christmas Ring. You don't want to miss it. Get your tickets today at thechristmasringmovie.com. That's thechristmasringmovie.com.
You know, yeah, we are, and I think we have one of the best spokeswomen on planet Earth in Erica Kirk. I mean, I was getting I'll leave the name private just out of respect, but imagine a really well-known woman was texting me, a media figure, you would know her, and she was just saying that she was, watching Erica's speech, and her daughter just fixated, like never could get her to watch anything on the news, and just Erica's speaking, wow. And she just fixated right on the speech for like 8 minutes, which was an eternity apparently for this child, and just said, and turned around and was like, she's amazing, like she's so beautiful, she's so smart, she, all these things. So I do think that Erica is going to be an amazing spokeswoman for the conservative movement and conservative values more broadly, and for family. But there's a couple dynamics at play here. I mean, I believe that Turning Point USA will always have, I think, a message that is directed in some ways for young men. I mean, that's the mold that Charlie built this organization in, and we cannot lose the young men. I believe young men are not the problem; young men are the solution. Mm-hmm. I will say that young men were the first to kind of resonate with some of these messages, especially from guys like Charlie, and others in the space. And what I noticed here, Lara, is that and I'm so glad Charlie got to see some of these trends. I noticed that there was a Yale youth poll that came out not too long before Charlie was killed, and it showed something really interesting about among the youngest cohort of voters. So that's at 18 to 21-year-olds, like there's the ones that are still on campus, college campus. They had it was like an R plus 19 for young men. So R plus 19, they're getting more conservative. I've heard that certain polls will show that Gen Alpha is even more conservative. So it's like the younger you keep going in this Gen Z cohort, the more conservative they're getting. But what was interesting about that was the first time I'd seen from it, especially Yale is they're not in the bag for conservatives here or anything. They showed young women 18 to 21 R+4. It was the first time I'd seen young women in a poll. So I have a couple theories on this. And that I believe that God designed men to be leaders. And women certainly can be leaders. You're a shining example of that. Erica Kirk is a shining example of this. But if you're taking it in the macro, if you've got a lot of young women that are hanging out with the football players and the like, just the normal cool guys that are like fun to hang out with, and they are all of a certain inclination, eventually you're going to start see that trickling in because people want to hang out with each other. People rub off on each other. Ideas are shared organically in that way, and it has this culture changing effect. And there's no doubt that we saw some very negative polling and exit polling out of New York City and out of Virginia and somewhat out of New Jersey. There is, again, I go back to what I said before. These things are not locked in stone. Young people are malleable, and they will move if you don't deliver the goods. But what I would say is that I think when you get the young men, there's a good chance you're going to start getting a lot of the young women as well. And so you pair up Erica Kirk and some of the other amazing voices out there like yourself and Melania Trump and Allie Beth Stuckey. And there is beginning. Riley Gaines comes to mind. Alex Clark also at Turning Point. You start seeing this growing chorus of young female voices mixed with this great cast of conservative thought leaders and podcasters and politicians. And I think we've got a really good shot. Again, we have to make sure our messaging is focused on the right things, that's really animating them, it's addressing their concerns. A lot of that's domestically, a lot of that's the economy. And if we do those things, we are going to be a formidable movement to come up, whether it's men or young women.
Yeah, and you know what? And you talk about culture. I noticed, Andrew, that it's just such a different time right now. This administration, this Trump administration 2.0, it's just so different. I mean, when the president goes to, a football game and guys scoring touchdowns are literally in the end zone doing a Trump dance because the president is at the game, that's really cool. And that does have an impact. It has an impact with young men. I agree with you, by the way. In your whole rationale behind how the women are going to follow the men. I think that's exactly right. And I think we just have to keep engaging and keep, making sure that people hear the truth out there, because sadly it's been really hidden from them in so many different ways. But we're in a different time. It feels very promising. Just to wrap us up here, midterms, we're always thinking for the future. We're always trying to make sure we have the right things going on so that we continue all the winning in this country. Any bold predictions for the midterms? And for anyone who is listening right now who wants to get involved with Turning Point to help make things happen, please let everybody know how they can get involved.
Yeah, if you're, and I'll start with that last question first. If you are a student, obviously join a chapter, start a chapter today, TPUSA.com. Our field team is hitting the ground. We're starting 50 new college or high school chapters a day.
So cool.
50.
Amazing.
And we used to start them with like a core group of like 2 or 3 or 4 students. Now they're starting with like a dozen. So you're instantly going to have a big group of friends at whatever school you find yourself at. So do that if you're a student. If you're an adult, sign up to be a volunteer at Turning Point Action. So go to tpaction.com and get involved. There's lots of prompts that will guide you, and we have an app that you can download and call people that are low propensity conservative voters that we can tell through our modeling or through the data directly that these are low prop people. So we know how many times anybody's kind of voted in the past cycles. This really well.
That's how we won in 24. You get the low propensity voters, get them out. Yeah.
And we are now in the era of Trump, the low propensity, farmer, welders and mechanics and HVAC guys. This is who we are now. We're the muscular class. We just don't tend to be as routinized when it comes to to voting. And by the way, also, men don't tend to vote as often as women. They're not as predictable when because that's just men. That's dudes. So we've got a lot of work to do. And so you can get on the app, especially when election time starts ramping up, and volunteer and take ownership of like 100 low prop voters in a swing state. So these are things that anybody can do, and our app makes that completely easy and seamless, and you can do it from the comfort of your home, or you can join our volunteer programs where we actually buy out huge hotel blocks, and you can come in state and go knock on doors and join our paid staff and our volunteer staff to go do that. And we're going to do that during the midterms. We're going to have select states. But listen, I'm not going to give any bold predictions about 2026. It's going to be an uphill battle until this movement proves that we can win elections when Trump's not on the ballot in an off year, which I consider midterm elections like quasi off year. I think I am not a doom and gloom after the Virginia and New Jersey by any means. I think it was an off year. That's going to be tough for us in our current composition of our base and our voters. But I'm not worried about the presidential election. It's just too big. It's too loud. Everybody knows it's coming. It dominates the national discussion, so that even low prop voters are going to be more aware, and they're going to make it more of a priority. But I think midterms is going to be a struggle for us again. And I would just say, don't doom and gloom it. Just get to work. Join Turning Point Action, volunteer, get on the app, those types of things. What we're going to be doing from a resource perspective, and by the way, this is all easy calls because Charlie kind of mapped all this out with us before, and we were involved. Tyler Boyer over at Turning Point Action, myself, and a few others about mapping out the strategy. And we're going to be deploying resources in key states that we think we're going to get the best ROI, and that's going to make the biggest difference to holding the House, right? And by the way, laying the foundation for what we call the red wall. And Lara, I'd love to tell you about that sometime, of how we're gonna be building our own red wall by making a couple key investments ahead of 2028. So 2026 is going to be, let's hold the House, but let's also lay the foundation for 2028 and make sure that it's going to be nigh impossible for Democrats to win a national race. And so, because we want to make sure that it's not just 4 years of President Trump, but we get another, let's just say 12 years altogether with the president that comes after, and it's going to be a Republican president. So those are the things we're saying. But the other thing I have my eye on, Lara, is the redistricting battles, right? With Texas, my big question mark is those maps are engineered pretty tight based on an assumption, and the assumption is that we're going to be performing roughly the same as we did in 2024 with Hispanics. So if we underperform with Hispanics, we're going to open ourselves to potentially some vulnerable races there. We have to guard against that. But Texas and California are going to basically match each other. It's going to cancel each other out at that point. And so what about Indiana? What about Ohio? What about Nebraska? Those are the things I'm looking at when it comes to keeping the House red and keeping President Trump with a House that he can work with in 2026.
Well, we know one thing. We do not want Democrats yet, Andrew, to be able to enjoy that big, beautiful ballroom that's being built. So let's make sure that it's a Republican president who follows President Trump. It's crazy. They're all so crazy. I don't know how they're winning any elections, but we are going to try to make sure they do not anymore. Andrew, you're awesome. Thanks for spending time with us. Thanks for all you do and continue to do. We got your back. We're here, our entire family. I think you guys know this, but we're here for you. This fight encompasses all of us, and the Trump family didn't get into anything for 4 years, 8 years, or as it turns out now, 12 or beyond. We're here forever. So really appreciate you, and thanks for spending the time with us today.
Well, you're awesome too, Laura, and you were a total inspiration. You stepped up when we were at a point where we needed you to step up, and I think I speak on behalf of all of Turning Point, but honestly the country, and saying thank you for your service and just for being so steady and consistent, and just knowing how and what esteem Charlie held you it's fun for me to be here and on your show and be able to tell you that. And we know it. We know you guys got our back, and we have yours.
Oh, you're the best. All right. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. To everybody at home, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more. And I won't